Morning, everyone. Apologies for the audio delays. Visual was working, but audio was not. Thank you to everybody in the room, and it looks like we've got lots of folks zooming in virtually. So welcome, and thanks for getting up. What feels like early. We were just talking about how 7:30 didn't seem early a few years ago, but now for some reason it does seem early for all of us to get together. So really appreciate all of you joining us, and a big thank you to Shelley, who's not in the room, who was helping us figure out our technical issues, but a big thank you to Marsh for hosting us. We've got, you can't see this online, but we've got a beautiful view of the lake and the blue sky, and so we're excited to do even more events here, I think, as time goes on. And so today, we've got some speakers coming to us from all over the world. We're really thrilled to have this group together and talk about, how can digital health make, all of our lives easier, and what can we do to really spread this innovation. But before we do that, I just want to do a quick land acknowledgement. So today we recognize that the land we're standing on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I also acknowledge that Ontario is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. So what I really want to do is just kind of hand the floor over to our speakers, but to everybody both in the room and online, please feel free to prepare your questions. I think we can probably keep it fairly casual. If you do have a question, I'll be here to kind of field those between those of us in the room, those of us online, and the speakers. And so today joining us, we have Emily Seto, Daniel Capuro, and Niels Peak. And so I'm going to first hand it to Emily to just give us a bit of an overview of the International Center, and then we'll dive into the other presentations. So with that, Emily, I will mute myself and then get you to come off mute, and I will hand the floor to you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just trying to share the screen, but I can't until the sharing is stopped by whoever has it right now. Great. Okay, so I'm hoping everybody can see that. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so first of all, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're absolutely delighted to be here to tell you about the International Center for Translational Digital Health. Just to give a bit of an overview of what we're planning on doing today, we are going to do a quick introduction to the center. Then I'm handing it over to Dr. Niels Peak, who's going to provide some highlights of some recent activities. Then we're going to head it over to Dr. Daniel Capuro, who is going to provide a brief overview of an example of very relevant work to the center that is happening in Melbourne through what is called the Validitron. So the plan is to have quite a bit of time, and we're hopefully going to be able to do that for discussion and to answer any of your questions. I know there are a variety of stakeholders and thought leaders joining us today, so we want to hear from you and to hear thoughts about the center and how it might be of use to you. So a bit of context in terms of the creation of the International Center for Translational Digital Health. It is a part of a much larger alliance between the three universities of Manchester, Melbourne, and Toronto. And our center is actually the first of several that are planned that are going to be across the three universities with different fields. So in terms of our field of digital health, it made a lot of sense for the International Center to be across these three universities, and particularly across these three different cities. For a number of reasons, and the similarities here are listed. Basically, there are similar urban regions with highly diverse populations and substantial health inequalities that are within our health system, as well as our healthcare systems are largely publicly funded. And in particular, in Canada and Australia, we have similarities in terms of extreme morality, as well as a history of underserved and marginalized Indigenous communities.
Emily?
Yeah?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're having some issues in the room, so I'm just going to pause you for a second.
Sure, no problem.
Give us 1 second.
Awesome. Okay, so a quick recap of the recap. So basically, we're talking about our International Center for Translational Digital Health. As I mentioned, it's a collaboration between 3 universities of Manchester, Melbourne, and Toronto. It's the first of hopefully many centers that will be created between the 3 universities. And I was just talking a little bit about why it made sense to have a digital health international center due to the similarities within the different cities, basically, that we are housed in. So again, maybe I'll just go a little bit more quickly just to get through this so we have more time to chat. But again, here's listed some of the similarities about the population around the healthcare systems being largely publicly funded. We do have, infrastructure in terms of the databases, academic and hospital networks, as well as data science and AI institutes that are very strong in each of the different cities as well. In addition, we have quite a number of different organizations and infrastructure for commercialization and for evaluation of digital health innovations. So all to say is that each city in itself is a bit of a hub with activity in digital health. So here's again, the co-directors of the center. We have 2 from each of the universities. Unfortunately, Dion is not able to join us today. She wasn't feeling well. But Dion and I are from the University of Toronto. We have Professor Niels Peek and Professor Angela Davies, who are from the University of Manchester. And we have Professor Wendy Chapman and Dr. Daniel Capuro, who are from the University of Melbourne. So I'm sure you've all seen this figure before and are familiar with the kind of the valleys of death of innovations. And as you can probably tell from the name of our center, we are very much focused on the translation of digital health innovations, which is about crossing that second valley and really getting these new digital health innovations into the hands of the patients and healthcare providers. And of course, in particular, we are interested in supporting this translation internationally. So our mission statement is as follows: to advance the field of digital health in Canada, the UK, and Australia through research and training in order to realize the development, implementation, and of course, translation of inclusive and equitable technologies, policies, and service delivery models. Our purpose is to create a community of researchers and partners. And by partners, it's very encompassing of many stakeholders that yourself represent, as well as trainees, that accelerates the delivery of digital health in the 3 countries and provides digital health leadership that benefits the world. So obviously, we're concentrating our work within these 3 countries at the start, but I think we have a lot of opportunities for expanding our partnerships in the future as well. The impact we like to achieve encompasses the following: the creation and utilization of new technologies, the translation of theory into effective and equitable public policy, of course, the training of leaders in the field of digital health, and overall strengthening the health service delivery. In order to achieve this, we have created 3 hubs, and we're going to keep revisiting these hubs to make sure that they're most relevant. Right now, we have the remote monitoring and virtual care hub. We have a health policy and implementation hub, and we have a data science and AI hub. And for each of these, we have at least 1 hub lead from each of the universities to help drive activities within that particular hub. So this is my last slide before I hand it over. In terms of activities, we are focused largely around research and training, which makes sense because we are based within universities. But the ultimate goal of this activity is really to develop, implement, and translate digital health. and of course, particularly within the countries that we represent. So Niels is going to talk more about some of the highlights of the recent and upcoming activities, but just as a quick overview, in terms of the research domain, we're very interested in, for example, having workshops, seeding partnerships, international projects. We also would very much like to create a network, right? And we've already started doing that for matchmaking, for projects, and for grants, et cetera. We're also working on developing a joint PhD program, which we are really excited about, where PhD students would have a primary university, but would spend time and get recognition from a different partner university. Other things within training to highlight are joint teaching opportunities that we are looking into that leverages the considerable expertise across the countries, as well as expanding experiential learning and supporting student exchanges. So with that, I'm going to hand it over now to Niels to talk more specifically about some of the recent and upcoming activities.
Right, thanks, Emily, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I hope you can hear me okay, both online and in the room. So just by way of background, my name is Niels Beek. I'm Professor of Health Informatics at the University of Manchester in the UK, and I also lead the University of Manchester's Institute for Health Technology Research and Innovation, the Christopher Pankhurst Institute. So I'm just going to talk you through some recent and also upcoming activities to give you a flavor of the kind of thing that we do, and also tell you how that relates to some of the things that Emily showed you, for instance, the 3 different hubs that we have. So here's an overview. I will go into more detail on the next slide for most of these points. So we've been organizing collaborative research and education workshops between the 3 sites, very often between 2, not 3, because of the time differences. We've ran a seed funding competition last year. I'll tell you a little bit about more about that on the next couple of slides. We've had staff and students visiting some of the other sites. We've written a viewpoint paper, which is currently under review. We've been writing several joint funding applications because acquiring external investment is one of the key aims also of the center. We've just started a monthly webinar. So yesterday we had the inaugural version of that, and each of the hubs is going to host a webinar. So this month, yesterday it was hosted by the Remote Monitoring and Virtual Care Hub, and next month we're going to have one from Health Policy and Implementation and so on. And then we're also planning to do presentations at international conferences. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned the workshops. So this picture actually was taken in December 2021 in Manchester. We had several colleagues from Toronto visiting us then, and we felt that's a fantastic opportunity to do a joint workshop between Manchester and Toronto. So we had people from Manchester and colleagues from Toronto who were visiting in the room, but also a number of people joining online. And this is actually the workshop that led to the viewpoint paper that I'll touch upon later. Next slide, please. So then we ran this seed funding competition, and I think this gives you a good flavor of the type of work that's going on in the center. This was between University of Manchester and Toronto because it was actually just before Melbourne formally came on board. We already had conversations with them at the time, but they were not formally part of the center. And this all happened in the first half of 2022. So the first project, led by Brian McMillan and Caroline Steele-Gray, focused on patient access to online electronic health records. A very hot topic, both in many countries, including England and Canada. So what they did is compared, what are the policies on that front between the 2 countries, or England and Ontario, and what is the actual practice? And this is very much a moving target, but I think it's a really interesting piece of work. I think a paper has been written up, as soon will be submitted for publication. The next one looked at a commercialization pipeline to spread and sustain Canadian digital therapeutics in the UK. And this relates to one of the aims that we have at the center, is to help to spread and sustain digital interventions between different countries, which we know is challenging because you have to know the healthcare system, and very often you would not have that knowledge and expertise in your own organization. So that's also the reason why we have the International Center, because we have that expertise between the different sites. Then the third one, led by Alison Crawford and Sabine van der Veer, looked at digital health inequities, and especially those created by new digital interventions. Again, I think a really important topic, which is also very hot at the moment. Many people looking at this. We know that digital health interventions can introduce new access barriers to health services, but they can also reduce them. So it goes both ways. And it's really important that we thoroughly understand how this works. Then number 4, led by Corinne Nalic and Theresa Stuckel, looked at federated de-identification of clinical free text data. If you can do that, then you can make free text data available for researchers. At the moment, that's quite hard very often because they can be named, etc., in clinical free text. And this looked at methods to remove those identifiable data. And finally, we had a student visit. We have 2 groups, so one in Manchester, one in Toronto, looking at wearable electrophysiology, both using slightly different approach. And this was an opportunity to compare what they are doing quite thoroughly. The next slide, please. We had Alison Crawford, who's involved in the Digital Health Inequities Project, visiting us in Manchester. This was in September on the back of the seed funding that was acquired for that project. And we used that opportunity to record a podcast. So the Pancras Institute, which I lead, has a monthly podcast, and I think last month, and this month edition actually was published early this month, was the interview recorded earlier with Sabine and Alison on this topic of digital inequities. Next slide, please. Then we also asked people, so what has happened with your seed funding project and what have you learned? And there were a number of interesting observations there. So first of all, one thing that several projects said, there are some non-trivial differences in the health domain terminology between Canada and the UK, even though they both use the English language. So we all felt, it should never be a problem to communicate. Actually, it's a little bit harder than you would expect. We also experienced that international collaboration tends to accumulate the already considerable academic bureaucracy. So that's something that I think we need to address with our universities. We also found that there are substantial differences in health service funding models between Canada and the UK, and that impacts the organization's structure and delivery of services. And when we tried to roll out a Canadese digital therapeutic, Medley, that's been very successfully developed, deployed, and trialed in Ontario, we felt that that was actually harder than we expected for some of the things I've already mentioned. And for instance, challenges were, how do you onboard clinical champions? That's different in how you do that in the UK than in Canada, but also technological readiness of the environment where we wanted to deploy the technology. So we learned that the best approach is to do a pilot evidence generation trial first to assess feasibility and explore acceptability. Next slide, please. So I've already mentioned we've written a viewpoint paper that's soon to be published, and this was done by the Remote Monitoring and Virtual Care Hub. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide. So in a couple of months' time, a number of us are going to be in Sydney at the MedInfo conference, the World Conference for Health and Medical Informatics. So that's going to be a rare opportunity where we're all going to be in the same room physically, and we'll be presenting about the center to that community. So that was my last slides, and I hand over to Daniel.
Thank you so much, Niels, and thank you everyone for having us today. And I will share my screen. All right, so today I'm gonna talk about the Digital Health Validitron, which is a project that we have been working here at the University of Melbourne, but we think it's one of our contributions to this international center because it sits right in the middle of one of these valleys of death that Emily described in the translation of digital health innovations. And the core idea is that as opposed to what happens with drugs and devices, where there's a very clear pathway to bringing these new innovations into the market, there's this gap for digital health innovations. And we don't really, there's not a clear regulatory pathway yet. The level of evidence that needs to be generated is not entirely clear. And so there was a lot of innovation happening at universities, at startup companies that are not reaching patients and health services. So we sought to close this gap. And so we created this project called the Digital Health Validatron, which has two main components, a simulation lab and a digital sandbox. And we're going to discuss a little bit about those. And I'm going to show you this video that explains way better what we're doing.
When you come up with a digital health app or you develop a new innovation, it's really unclear about how to get it implemented into the healthcare system. Hospitals and clinics want to be innovative, but it's a very risky place to try new innovations.
We see increasing numbers of people in the community with devices that they're carrying in their everyday lives who are also interested in doing things to support their health.
And so there's this big gap between all the knowledge that's being produced and how do we bring that knowledge and those advancements into healthcare.
It's not a technical issue. It's about figuring out how to create a new model of care where the digital tool enables the communication and the decision-making across the healthcare team. At the University of Melbourne, we really have a multidisciplinary team that we're putting together that addresses all of the different issues that are important for implementing innovation in healthcare.
On one side, we have university and traditional researchers generating a lot of innovation in the use of artificial intelligence and digital technologies, human-computer interaction.
We're also really fortunately situated here in a world-leading hospital precinct. I think the mission of the centre is to work together with the health economy to both figure out new ways to solve problems in digital health, but also then actually do it for real.
The Validatron provides an opportunity for companies to implement what they're doing into the healthcare market.
We want to be able to meet innovators where they're at in their product development journey and really help them figure out what are the priorities to address.
There are two key components in the Validatron that support this process. One of them is a digital sandbox.
We have all the digital components that would normally be part of the healthcare system. So an electronic health record for general practice, a simulated electronic health record for a hospital environment, a telehealth client, smartphone applications, secure messaging systems, and so on.
But the IT part and the data part are really the enablers for the workflow. And so we also have a simulation lab, which is a physical space with a GP office, a hospital room, and a patient home.
Which is designed to be really immersive and really bridge the gap between what you can do in a lab and what you can do out there in the real world. As innovators come out of it, they're able to go to funders or to healthcare providers and say, I have a product that is well validated.
We bring a lot of expertise in all these different methods to support an innovation and make sure that it can be safely and effectively brought to clinical practice.
If you're a digital health innovator and the challenges of getting things out into meaningful clinical practice are things that you're already thinking about, then we'd really like to encourage you to get in touch.
We see a vision of connected health, where that patient is able to navigate the system, receive the best care possible and the safest care possible, and be a partner in their healthcare.
And so I'm going to walk you quickly through a very short example of this. This is a company called NetHealth that they already had a product that was designed to facilitate remote patient monitoring. And they came to us to understand what's the best way to incorporate this into a telehealth session. And so Mount Superior, this is our simulated healthcare system. And this is our white label telehealth client, where we can drop this existing application that we help convert into a Smart on Fire application to make these two applications talk to each other, and we can drop them into this this client. And here you can see again a quick video, and we included this NetHealth add-on, and you can see that the information is being displayed on the right side. This is a Smart on Fire application that was deployed in the Smart on Fire container, and you can see that we can try different options and of what needs to be tested in how are we going to incorporate these new pieces of technology into the existing workflows, and in this case, a telehealth client. So here you can see with the the blue lines, this is the Smart on Fire application inside this container, and all of these are connected using standard APIs. And as we described in the video, it's not just about the digital sandbox, but also the physical space where everything is fitted to do human-computer interaction studies, co-design sessions, and simulating clinical workflows until we nail down what's the best way to deploy these new innovations in real healthcare environments. And the sandbox, the digital sandbox lives in the cloud, so we can bring these tools to any other physical settings that might be needed in that particular use case: operating theaters, emergency departments, critical care units, in addition to the ones that you see here. So again, the whole focus is to provide an environment that serves as a preclinical environment for innovators, for researchers to bring their products and figure out, understand, co-design what's the best way to incorporate these into the existing clinical workflows. And back to you, Emily.
Great, thank you, Daniel. So again, just to thank you all for joining us today. If you'd like to know a little bit more about the center, we do have a website, and you can either Google us or go to our website. We do have a listserv as well if you'd like to join our community, and you get to the listserv sign up through our website. And we do have an email address as well if you'd like to contact us through email. And I think we do have a little bit of time left for discussion. I did come up with we have a few questions here to kind of start the conversation. Of course, happy to kind of answer any questions, but in particular, we'd be very interested to hearing about, from your viewpoint, some of the challenges that you have in implementing and innovating healthcare services, digital health technologies in healthcare. How do we, as the center, best help you, knowing that you're representing a number of different stakeholders, and also we'd be very interested to hear how you think we can best engage with you as the center. So I think I'm going to, should I leave this on, or I can just take it off, I suppose, at this point? Okay.
You can hear me okay, everybody? Yeah, I'm going to take advantage of my spot at the podium and ask the first question, which probably some of you are thinking. One of the biggest challenges we face here, which I'm sure is true all over the world, is this idea of, as soon as something's in the cloud, how secure is it? And I think adoption of these technologies, that's always a barrier that gets in the way. So Daniel, you mentioned FHIR, which I've heard a number of groups speak about. Can you tell us a bit about this FHIR rules and regulations and why that's the gold standard?
Yeah, so and FHIR it doesn't address the whole ecosystem of things that need to be done in terms of securing these applications. What it provides is a framework of to exchange information in a way that makes it easier for developers that are used to working with web technologies and exchange information that describes healthcare processes. One of the examples that I showed you is the Smart on Fire. That is one instance of use of this FHIR interface, where we allow one application to be run on top of another application. And in that case, the Smart and Fire framework, it does deal with the authentication procedure to allow us to understand that, you know, the person that is accessing, let's say, the electronic medical record and the Smart and Fire application is authorized to see that. And so in this case, that particular framework does deal with one aspect of the, you know, cybersecurity, but of course, everything that is, you know, databases where these things are stored, application servers, information being exchanged, all of those are, you know, need to be fully addressed when we think about these applications. The Fire also, I think that one of the attractives is that it has been mandated in the United States as part of their 21st Century Cures Act. So that means that a lot of the electronic medical record vendors had been implementing them and rolling it out, and now we have you know, a known access point to connect with existing electronic health records.
I'm going to open up to the floor. I know Jason Fields always got questions. I'll repeat it if you
Sure.
online.
I'm Frank Talk Lab.
Okay.
Hopefully you can hear me. Health systems are notorious for being resistant to change, which is one of the reasons why we still have fax machines in our health system. The Validitron is a really interesting concept. I'm wondering if, in addition to validating technology, it's helped, you know, in terms of the adoption within the health systems, and if there's examples of that.
Yeah. So for our friends in Melbourne and Manchester, we still use fax machines in Canada. They're pharmacies. Yes.
Oh, and in Australia, same thing.
No, I don't feel so bad. So has the Validitron, I love the name, by the way, has that helped with some of that resistance to change?
So I would say, I would qualify that. I think healthcare systems experience this very intense tension between the need to innovate and the resistance to innovate. And we have extreme cases with people doing, you know, catheterizations on their own bodies because they want to advance the technology, all the way to, you know, we keep using faxes till this day. In that space, I think that the Validitron it's a fairly new lab. We launched it this last September, so we don't have products that have made it all the way to clinical environments. But we have seen that when we bring clinicians and decision makers into the Validitron and they can see the products operating, that that demonstration, it can change a lot of, you know, resistance to change. So I think we see a little bit of that now. We can give you an update in a few more months when we'll start to see a few of the first products being actually deployed in clinical practice.
Any other questions? Oh, we got one over here.
I've been interested across the group, just following on this resistance. I mean, quite often, my premise is policy tends to follow significantly after technological innovation. So that's part of the resistance. I'm wondering to what degree the research and the work and all the activities they were talking about help to address some of the policy questions that need to promote digital healthcare adoption.
So the question is really how is the work you're doing sort of facilitated you know, conversations around policy change?
Yeah, I can pick that up, and it's a really good point, and it's one of the reasons that we have one hub focused on health policy and implementation, because we're very aware indeed that if you want to make any changes in any healthcare system across the globe, you have to start with redefining policies that enable people to use your innovation or your technology. So one of the projects I mentioned looked at policies around patient access for electronic health, online electronic health records. So that hub has been looking at specifically in that Seedcorn project at policies in Canada and the UK on that front. So I think it's absolutely true. It's integral to any form of innovation that you do, and that's the reason why we have that hub.
Really great question from our virtual audience. How do you engage patients in the project? So, in terms of understanding the challenges and how you're designing something that you're sort of rolling out in the literature.
So in the specific case of the Validitron, the lab has a physical space that is designed to bring patients into co-design sessions, and we have a group of expert methodologists that are creating a toolbox of different ways to engage patients in the design and implementation of these systems. And we also, you saw in the video quickly, we have a patient, simulated patient home that looks way nicer than my home. But that's precisely because we want to make sure that we bring that we recognize that as a part of the healthcare system nowadays with the technology that we have available. And so it's I would say it's a core component of the development process right now.
Maybe I could also chime in on that. Daniel's been doing a great job kind of describing some of the work that's happening in Australia. We do have, as you know, in being in Canada, we do have a lot of this, research happening as well. And we do have kind of like a parallel center called the Center for Digital Therapeutics, doing research in digital health. I would say, at the very beginning, most of, at least the projects that I've been involved in, doesn't start without some kind of patient partner, right? So, and in fact, we don't even get funding now through any of our granting agencies, generally, if we don't involve some patient partners. So that's kind of like really top of mind, even when we start kind of conceptualizing what we're going to be doing, is that we involve the patients at the very beginning. And certainly, as Daniel was kind of like describing, a lot of those patients come in doing usability testing. They help even be part of the research team, right? And so they help drive the research questions, making sure that the methodology makes sense. And then even in terms of like product stuff, right? We always go back to the patient and get feedback. And, parallel to the patients, obviously, is the healthcare providers. So we kind of put a lot of emphasis in involving the clinical champions as well in any kind of our research projects. Great. I love to hear that level of engagement. We've got a question over here.
Yeah, everyone. My question is about the interaction with patients. If they are at home, whether it would be through like chatbots or virtual meeting with doctors, and any kind of medical examination, like for example, someone has backache, how they can figure it out, and for decision making, is it part of the process?
So the question, just for, because it may have been hard to hear, is really around the, when you think about the work that you're doing with patients, is, how, virtual health is, if you're talking about acne or, things that are sort of easy to see online, it's not that difficult to engage. But, when you think about something like a backache or high blood pressure, it's a little bit harder. So how are you addressing those issues through the virtual interactions? Is it via chatbots or real doctors, or is there any medical devices involved? Or all of the above?
I can perhaps speak to that. So we've got a project in Manchester around virtual care, specifically online consultation in primary care. And the approach there is that patients can engage with their general practitioner via a text-based web interface. So they are asked to answer a couple of questions, typically 4 to 6, depending on what their answers are. It's in free text, so they don't have to fill out long questionnaires. And then we've got an AI module that triages those requests. And to go back to the example, so what that AI module does is, assess whether that person needs to be seen by a person. In this case, I would say that that's probably relevant indeed. So if in the hypertension example, whereas for certain other problems, that's not necessary, and it can be done online, or perhaps they don't have to see a healthcare professional at all, and they can go to their pharmacist directly, or they can self-care. So typically what people approach general practitioners with is very broad range of health problems, and the AI triage module helps the practice to find out what is really needed for that individual case.
Yeah, and maybe just to add also, I mean, the pandemic has done many terrible things in the world. One of the positives is maybe advancing virtual care, right? And we kind of like seen it working. And, I think it may have advanced it 20 years, right? Because it's been such a slow uptake. I've been doing kind of work around remote patient monitoring or management for a very long time, more than a decade or two. And, it's been a very slow uptake. Once the pandemic hit, the virtual care and even remote management, and by remote management, I mean, taking physiological measurements at home and then, interacting with the healthcare provider either through phone or through video has really shot up, right? And so I think there's like a huge opportunity. And again, one of our hubs is dedicated to the virtual monitoring and virtual care, right? And so I think it's a very exciting time actually for that area.
Maybe to build on that, are you seeing policymakers sort of slide backwards and say, okay, now that the pandemic is quote unquote over, we're not going to be reimbursing for virtual care, or we're thinking that maybe some of our
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think, some of the, billing codes are still kind of open, which is good. I think they were keeping some of those billing codes open, knowing that it's hard to take back at this point, and it was working. I think that, some of the success stories that happened during the pandemic in terms of remote monitoring and virtual care, it just bolsters the evidence that it can work. And at least with some of the programs, Neil's mentioned the Medley program, which is mainly a heart failure remote patient management system. That's an app-based system. In the past year, it's been spread through several different healthcare organizations within Ontario. We've had a standard of care program at the University Health Network since 2016, but again, it's been slow going, right? And I think that it's starting to gain a lot of interest. I think that the whole area of it is gaining interest, and I do hope that some of the policy, especially around the funding, is going to start changing to enable the innovation to exist.
So we're out of time, but I just want all of you guys to know it was worth the wait. That was really fascinating. I was looking around the room while you were presenting, and everybody's face was fully engaged in the screen. I didn't see any heads sit down looking at their phones. So that's always the sign in these days of a great presentation. It was really, really interesting, and I love it's relevant to all of us. I love the public health approach, and we're all really able to understand how meaningful the work that you're doing is. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to our fearless leader, Jason Field, to make some announcements and close us out.
Well, thank you, Anne, and wonderful job moderating. Just a round of applause for our speakers and Anne. Thank you. All right, we have a few announcements to make. Brian, just pull them up on the screen here. So upcoming events. So we have our breakfast meeting continues May 11th. We have a theme around water and water monitoring. So we've seen during COVID-19 how the use of water surveillance really impacted how we managed COVID, and that extends very far beyond just COVID-19. So we're going to have some experts in the water surveillance space come and meet with us. And then on June 15th is our member marathon, where we feature new members to LSO. You find out about what's happening with them, their technologies, and their organizations. Our biggest event of the year is our annual awards gala, which is going to be happening on May 17th. We're anticipating over 500 people attending this event. Tickets are going fast, so if you haven't signed up already, registered, I'd ask you to check that out. We're honoring some fantastic individuals and organizations across the life sciences sector. And our LSO golf tournament. And the great thing about the LSO golf tournament is it's best ball. So you don't have to be a good golfer, thank God. Um, and we're also going to have, I think, a learn to golf session as well, too. We're trying to organize that in advance of the session. So, and if you don't want to golf at all, that's fine, too. You can just come for the networking. We have an option to just join us for lunch. It's going to be held at Lionhead this year. So great opportunity to network, get outdoors, meet some of your fellow life sciences stakeholders at this event. And finally, just a reminder that our sponsorship program is heading into its 5th year. This has been a great initiative from LSO in terms of furthering diversity and inclusion within the sector, really promoting students pursuing careers in the life sciences. Along with the awards comes mentorship with our sponsor organizations as well. We've had some really positive feedback and have impacted many lives through this program. We're always looking for further support. So if you're interested, we have different levels of support available. So if you want to find out more, you can contact the office and find out. And finally, a thank you to all of our sponsors, our platinum sponsors shown here, our gold sponsors, and of course our silver sponsors. We really couldn't hold events like this without that ongoing support of these corporate sponsors. And finally, thank you for attending, and thank you to Marsh for hosting us here today. It's a great venue, and now that we've worked out all the kinks in the AV, it's going to go even smoother next time. So thank you. Have a great day, everyone. And it's still on the food complex, so help yourself.